All right. Well, welcome back. I'm glad most of you came back. So just real quick, a couple of things before we get started on kind of working through the facility and so forth. So horse versus foot versus ATV. How many of you work with ATVs, gathering or moving cattle? A couple of you. Horses, by the majority of you. And then on foot. So all three of those have, of course, some pros and cons to them. I guess, again, my preference is, mostly because I'm lazy, is to use a horse. And so a horse, you're going to have a little different presence in a flight zone, and again, that makes sense. It's obvious because you're bigger, but you have a little different presence in a flight zone than you would on foot. What are advantages or disadvantages of an ATV that you use an ATV?
Can't get close. Can't cut. Hard to tie a rope to it.
Yeah. It's hard to dally, right?
Well, how much impact does the sound have?
Right. So you got the sound, so you've got a different type of pressure there. The other thing, think about, if I'm working on horse, and those of you that work with horses, what do you need a horse to do in order to effectively move and with cattle, and to effectively pressure and relieve pressure from cattle? You need them basically to, right? Yeah, you basically need to be able to go forward, to go back, move their front end or move their back end, right? It's really hard to do that with an ATV. So especially in smaller areas, that's I think impossible to do. But there are obviously some advantages and so forth. So just thinking about those different types of pressures and different types of ways that you depending on how you work with your cattle, whether that's on foot, horseback, or ATV. So this is a bud box design, and so basically, again, those cattle will flow in here. They'll flow from wherever I'm feeding them from. As they come in, I'll close this gate behind me, and hopefully by that time they've hit the end of that fence and are turning around. And so here is where hopefully I can effectively put pressure on those cattle to go up into that alley. So they make that curve, again, taking advantage of that natural instinct of them to go around me, that they'll hopefully find that hole and feed up in there. So that's the idea of the bud box. And so one of the things that, again, a lot of temple stuff talks about safety. Advantages of a bud box are that, of course, you're in there with the cattle and you can apply and remove and work that pressure, and you get a lot more feel for how those cattle are moving in there. But saying that, it's exactly a disadvantage too, especially if you think about it from a safety standpoint. With a tub, you're outside of those cattle, right? In a bud box, you're in with them. So again, if you're dealing with those F1 Brahma crosses or something that's got a little more bite to them, if you will, that's going to be a little difficult because there may be a cow that eats me up if I'm in here, right? And so there's different ways you can still use a bud box, but I may be on the outside here putting that pressure on there and trying to do that. Again, depends on that flight zone and how much feel those cattle have. I suspect with these heifers that, because they are a little sticky, that we are going to have to put a little more pressure on them. I talked about the biggest problems that we have, whether it's a tub or whether it's a bud box or however we're doing those, is getting too many cattle in here. So whether it's a tub or a bud box, you never want to store cattle in that bud box. You never want to store them in your tub. Again, because we talked about what's that natural tendency. They turn around. If it's full, they turn around. Then you have a hard time getting them kind of going again and going in the right direction. So that's another little tip as far as effectively using either a tub or a bud box. So let's try to bring these in and see if they'll cooperate. So. Another thing that's important that I didn't talk about before, but is making sure that you don't have any obstructions. You don't have anything that's going to cause them to either get hurt or do whatever. So I've checked my gates, make sure my gates are right. So I put a little pressure on the front, allow it to move around me. So one mistake I've made here is I've had this gate swung the wrong way. So I should have had that gate swung the other way so I could close that in on them. So it was hard to see, but you kind of notice I had a little trouble getting them started to go into there, right? And part of that, I don't know if you were able to see, but what did I tell you a little before about that depth perception? There's that little bar on that bow gate on the ground there that was part of what was causing them to balk. And so they had to check that out. Once I got the first couple through there, then they kind of figured out it was okay. But again, it was that little difference there that they had to check out first to go through. So looking at that lead up in that chute, how many of these size heifers is an appropriate number to kind of try to bring through there?
4 or 5.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. So about 4 or 5. If I try to bring too many, we'll demonstrate both ways and kind of see what happens there. So they hit the end of that fence and ask them to come around and put a little pressure on these lead ones. So now I'm kind of stuck here. So if I'm working by myself, I'm kind of a little bind here to get them to keep that flow going. So I'm not trying to put that pressure from behind them to push them through there. I'm using that point of balance. I'm going to go past her point of balance and let her go. I'll get in front of that point of balance, stop that one. So we've got 6 here, which I think may be one too many. Again, I've got to push them up here. And I was a little late. So now I've got to kind of get that pressure here. I've got to get in front of them to slow them up just a little bit. So again, I'm kind of stuck up there, right? So what's causing them to balk up there?
The depth perception.
Kind of the depth perception that's closed in, that's a tighter area, right? It's a different area. It's also a different flooring surface too. So all of those things are putting enough pressure on her that the pressure from behind is not compensating for that. So again, I'll try to catch her attention, go past her point of balance, and ask her to move through there. So again, I'm going to try to get her attention, go past her point of balance. So now they've all had a good experience going through there, right? They weren't, Richard wasn't drawing blood on them or doing anything to them. So hopefully the second time they should be a little easier to go through there. And so that's one of the strategies that I use in my own deal, is I try to work my replacement heifers through that system. At least, I mean, every time I have them near the corral, I'm training on them. You know, but I try to work them through that system once so that they understand which way they relieve that pressure. Yeah, Marcy.
So the comment was made that they looked like they were already trained. So you might explain why this worked so well in terms of just how they normally want to move and what makes it.
Right. So I guess, is Richard still here? Where's Richard at?
He's delivering garbage.
Okay. Or Shad. This is the first time I've seen these heifers this morning, and I don't know what their facilities are like here. I don't know if they've ever been through a bud box before. And I probably should have showed you that there weren't any tracks. I didn't run them through here before, just right now with you guys here. But the idea is again, that proper application and the proper relief of pressure allows them to do that. And so I was taking advantage of a couple of those basic principles that I was talking about. The first one is that they want to go around me, right? And so that's their natural instinct, is to go around me. So if I properly apply that pressure from here, they want to go around me. And so they see that opening and they see that that's where they relieve that pressure. And so they go in there. And so that's part of that. The second part is I'm using the draw. And again, that draw is how we entice them to do something, right? Or there's something that draws them to that. And so I'm using the draw of those other heifers to influence those, that peer pressure, you know, you're not cool if you don't do it, kind of deal, to get them to go up that alley. And so that draw in combination with hopefully the proper application of that pressure. So that second bunch, I thought I was going to have too many. I was going to try to demonstrate, you know, what happens when I plug it up. But there was enough draw and enough movement through there that I was able to get those six through there. So I'll show you. Let's go ahead and put those 10 or those 11 through there and just see what happens. If I can get that first bunch through there, then they'll draw hopefully through. Come on, girls. Come on. But I kind of lost it there, right? Because I let my bunch, I lost my flow. So again, I screwed that up, but again, I can't get too excited about that. We'll try it again. So I'll try to get a little more dry. I got in front of that point of balance, and I've got them facing different directions, so they're not wanting to work for me. So there's quite a bit of pressure coming from you guys, but I'm going to try to push them all up. So now they're getting a little sticky, so I've got to maybe use a little vocalization to kind of get them, put a little more pressure on them. So again, with too many, what happened with this last part of the bunch here? still a little sticky going through that chute. So you could see how I kind of lost the attention of those ones when we were plugged up there. They started turning around on me and so forth. And so now in this case, we were okay because we weren't catching them and processing them. And so there was enough flow that could catch them again, circle them around again, and do that. But in a real life scenario, again, that would have really caused me a little bit of a wreck. So I would have been better off that 4 or 5, do those, load that, work those. When there's one left in there, bring another 4 or 5 in and kind of follow them. Yeah, Marcy.
So one of the common mistakes that happens, and it's unintended, right? So everybody wants to help. You might have 5 people along the chute, or just like this, this is more people than they're used to. So in your mind, what's kind of an ideal ratio